Okay. Thank you all for coming to this multimedia presentation for Kinos. I hope everybody gets as much out of it as I did preparing it. This was a labor of love, although it's a sad experience. I think it's kind of unique. You won't find this type of presentation anywhere. I gave it a lot of thought through the year, and I hope everybody gets a lot out of it. Sorry about the typo in Congregational Art Torah. Okay. I want to show you the way I'm going to go about this this presentation. So after every kina, so we're going to go through the kinos, but we're not going to go through every kina, and we're not going to go through even the whole kina. We're going to take a little part of each kina, or we may take the overall theme of the kina. And I was thinking that what are we going to take away from this kina? What is the life message that we take away from kina X? I find that I've watched so many different kinos presentations, and then you hear the kina, and then you go on, and I'm not sure that there's like necessarily a takeaway. It's just it's sad and so on. But how are we different that now that we read the kina, this particular kina? So we're going to have each kina, I put the different picture, key takeaways. So each one will have my takeaway. So there's going to be here, you're going to see the same screen at the end of each one, and then there'll be a thought point. And then we'll take no more than 3 minutes. We're going to read the kina, and you should read it in a way that you understand it in English if you want, and then reflect on that thought point for like 3 minutes. Write down your thought point or my thought points. And then after we finish the presentation, you could come back and try to see how you can incorporate a message into your life. How could this kina change your particular life? Now, and through this presentation, there's going to be lots of videos, there's going to be studies, there's going to be text, there's going to be different things, historical stuff. I tried to keep it very short. I had tons of slides that I cut out of this presentation. You might come to a video, you'll see it says like 45 minutes, but we're only actually going to watch 3 minutes of those videos. I tried to keep them very short. I didn't want to, I want to make this a tight presentation, and so you'll see here a whole bunch of different types of things and questions that I think that hopefully will inspire you and move you and try to make you think. So let's get going. First, I want to start how did I get the impetus for this particular format of thoughts? So this came from a discussion I had from a friend of mine. He's a rabbi in Passaic. His name is Rabbi Yonah Lazar. And we were talking about it, Tisha Bav, at one point, and he said to me, "Doesn't Tisha B'Av all come down to this story?" I heard this story a million times, and when I started thinking about it, I thought, he is right. The story tells us that it says when Dov Ber from Mezrich was only 5 years old, his parents' house burnt down, and he couldn't understand why his mother was crying. She says, "I'm not crying about the house, but our family tree was in the house and it was destroyed." So he said this was the lineage that we had all the way back to Rabbi Akiva. So he says, "Don't worry, Mom. Our prodigy will start again with me. Our prodigy will start again with me." And I was thinking about that's really, and this is what Rabbi Yonah Lazar was pointing out, was that the idea of Tisha B'Av is not just about the destruction, but how do we build from this destruction? What's going to be the next level? It's not just looking at the destruction. How do we build for the future? Because all this destruction happened already. So that's what the focus of this presentation is. How do we build for the future from all the things that we experienced? So we'll start with kina number 6. I'm going to read the kinos in English, the parts that I have. I just have little pieces of them in each one. So this one says, in the middle of the kina, "Happiness has ceased. Depart from me. I hear from my detractors, those who were once my friends, call me dirty and repulsive. You have separated yourself by placing a canopy over the Holy of Holies. You concealed yourself and allowed the defeat of great men. My enemies cheer when I stumble, trampling on my warriors. You honor the lowly Babylonians with my precious vessels. They drew near to me and spoke evil. I called upon my ally Gibeon, but they acted as strangers to me. I called up Bnei Ishmael, but they ridiculed me. I called my lovers, but they tricked me. I came across this unbelievable video, and this, I want to get into a bigger question that has bothered me for, and I think bothered everybody for a long time. So we're not going to listen to the whole video. Again, most of the videos, we're just going to listen to parts of them. But I want to hear from this Holocaust survivor, Eva Schloss, on what happened when the Nazis came, how everything changed with the Nazis.
I come from Austria, Vienna, a beautiful city, beautiful country. We were very, very happy there. I was really a sporty child. I loved to go in the winter skiing. Already when I was 4 years old, I went on skis. And in the summer, we did mountaineering with my father. He was the same type. And swimming in the lakes and everything. And it just suited me perfect. We had a big extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and we are grandparents. And every week we went out all together. And all this was, of course, destroyed. Now, the Austrians decided they wouldn't want Hitler, and there was going to be voting early in February, but not to come together with Germany. But the Hitler didn't wait for that. And in March, they just invaded. And suddenly, the Austrians changed completely. As I say, they didn't want Hitler, but suddenly Hitler was welcomed. Everywhere in the street, people stood with their swastika flags and Heil Hitler and shouted. And it was amazing how they certainly changed. And as well, the attitude to their neighbors, to their Jewish friends had changed from one day to the next. It was a real great shock to us. And my father had foreseen things like that, and he was able to get on a business trip to the Netherlands the next day. Later, you couldn't just leave. It was much more difficult. That was my first experience with anti-Semitism. My best friend was Catholic. Now, how do people know you were Jewish? I didn't look Jewish. I was blonde and had blue eyes. But in Austria and Germany, I'm not sure if it's still the same now, but I think so. You had to have religious education. That was one of the subjects. And the Christians, of course, did the New Testament, but the Jewish children were taken out of their class and they were taken to a different classroom, and we had Jewish education, which was perfectly acceptable. Nobody minded. There was no problem about this at all. The only problem was, of course, that teachers, children knew who was a Jewish child. And so again, you know, when I went home after the invasion, my best friend was Catholic, actually. And usually on my way home, I popped in there and we did some games. And after this terrible day, I hadn't realized yet that things would change so immediately. And I went back there. And when the mother saw me, she slammed the door in my face and said, "We don't want to see you here ever again." I was 9 years old. I went home crying and I told my mother, "I don't understand. We didn't have a quarrel." And my mother said, "Well, things are going to change from now for Jewish people." And it did. My brother, who was 12, he went to school, he came back, he was completely beaten up, blood was streaming from his nose. And when we asked him what has happened, he said, "My own friends did that, and the teachers were watching it and didn't interfere." So this was the situation. So you can imagine that most people suddenly became panicky, tried to prepare to leave. But as soon as the Nazis got in, they started to organize it. You had to go get an exit visa, you had to go an entry visa, and all this had become very, very difficult. And this is really why we have to blame the whole world. it wasn't just Germany, but by 1938, 39, it became practically impossible for Jewish people to get a visa for any of the safe countries. President Roosevelt in 1936 already, he organized a conference in France, in Evian, to decide, and most countries were invited there, and the main object was to decide how many Jewish people countries will take in, and it was practically nothing. So, and Hitler realized when he wants to get rid of us and nobody wants us, well, the only way to get rid of us is to kill us. And I have a little proof of that he didn't want to kill Jewish people at first. My husband's family came from Munich, and his father was already arrested in 1933, taken to Dachau. Dachau was actually the first concentration camp, not a death camp, it was a concentration camp, and really for communists. But some Jewish people started to be arrested as well. He hadn't done anything. Probably somebody owed him some money, so he denounced him, and he was taken there. After 3 years, in 1936, he was released with a condition that within 6 weeks, with his family, he leaves the country. Well, they were not very rich. They had no influence, no connections. So his mother tried to go to all the consulates, tried to get, because in 36, still some countries did take Jews. But, you know, you had to have money or you had connections or so on. And couldn't find anybody. They became really desperate. Then they heard that the British consul in Munich had some special visa for special cases to go to Palestine. Well, Palestine was at the time, wasn't our state yet, and it belonged to really to the Arabs, and the Arabs didn't want Jews either, definitely not. Actually, it's quite interesting. Eichmann, who became really the biggest hunter for Jews and the decider of the final solution, he went very often to Palestine to negotiate with the Mufti of Jerusalem. He was the head of the Palestinian, if they would let the Jews in. And of course, they said, no, they don't want them. So, so this consul had papers for them to go to Palestine. So that shows you that if people would have got out, there wouldn't have been a chance for Hitler to kill us. So, and what is as well very, very important, why did the world not see this danger of Hitler? And that was because, you know, in Russia, after the end of the World War, the Communist Party became very powerful. And in Germany, after the First World War, there was really very great poverty. And there were many, many communists in Germany. And Hitler, the National Socialist Party, fought the communists. And so again, the world was more afraid of communism than of the National Socialist Hitler's party. So they thought, well, let Hitler fight the communists and, you know, we don't have to do it.
I was looking at this video and I was thinking about the idea that in this Kinot, so the Kinot starts off as Shavas, that the world is shocked. Like, what happened? Why did all this happen to us? And then it talks, well, the point that I showed you, it talks about the idea of that the friends, people who were friends, all of a sudden became not friends. Just overnight, they became not friends. And so what happened to all these people? What happened to, how did they go from such a thing, such a situation where they were all friends to the Jews,
Austria,
and then all of a sudden they're not friends anymore.
City.
So I found this video very interesting. How did ordinary citizens become murderers? And in the middle of this video, we always hear from the Jewish perspective of what happened, their experience of how their friends, you know, that the friends became not friends overnight, and then even, you know, trying to steal from them or beat them or so on. In this video, they have somebody who was a regular person, and then all of a sudden he became a Nazi, and he describes what happens what happened? What was the transformation during that time for him? So I'm going to skip to here, yeah, 20.
Who carried out mass shootings
So let's skip to here.
in some of the worst atrocities, and it'll bring up a question which we'll discuss later. There she is, on what was going through their minds, and how this could have possibly happened. But before we go on, I want to break for a moment for a video. Ioassos Alexinos was with the Lithuanian Security Battalion, who carried out mass shootings in Belarus. And it is chilling to hear how he explained events, and it's very instructive to hear this from the killers themselves. So why don't we cue that, and then we'll go on with the discussion.
Sakau, kai avinėliai kokie, be jokio pasipriešinimo neturi. O vaikai? Nešdavosi vaikus su savimi, mažiukus, kitus vesdavosi, į visus naikydavo.
Nu tai kaip, jeigu dabar mama arba tėvas, jeigu laiko vaiką ant rankų, tai kaip tai kartu su juo ir gulasi į duobę, ar kaip?
Gulasi ir vaiką palei save, ranką užsidėję, uždedant vaiko.
Tai jums reikėdavo rinktis, reiškia, ar šauti tėvą, ar šauti vaiką?
Tai pirma šauni jau tėvą. Tas jau buvo. Vaiką šauti tėvų. Vaikas jis nieko nejaučia. Pats ant save pagalvoji. Kaip jausis tėvas, kada palei mažą vaiką nušaus. Tai va tai tokia reikalas.
Nu, o vaiką kaip šauti reikėdavo paskui?
Tu nušovai, tai iš automato tai nešaudai, bet auto vieną šovinį padavai kitą ir šauni tada vaiką.
Nu, o kai jūs jau pasiūsdavo į tą šaudimą, tai kokia jūsų nuotaika buvo?
Neklauskit, aš neįsivaizduoju dabar apie tą nuotaiką, o tada lieki žmogus tokis, kai automatas. Ir pats nežinai ką, klaiku. Va. Kada žmogus darai ką nors darbą, va, su noru, tu jį apgalvoja viską, bet kada tu verčiamas ir nepakenčiamas darbas, tai žinot baisu.
Sakykit, vat, kai pasibaigė visi šitie karai ir visos šitos bėdos, grįžot jūs iš kalėjimų, iš lagerių. Ar jūs apie tos šaudymus jūs pasakojot žmonėm, vaikams savo?
Ne. Čia gėda buvo žmonėm pasakot. Gėda. Gėda į baisu. Žiauri padėti. Bjauriu.
So there you see how somebody will just become like a robot and carry out even the most heinous crimes. Just they get pulled in. Why so few resisted Hitler? This is I have a link here. It was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and at the end it says the most thought-provoking and disturbing conclusion that he arrives at is just how swiftly, under the condition of persistent crisis, Europeans were prepared to abandon their commitment to a normative morality and to ignore, justify, or endorse the persecution and the victimization that the German imperial authority indulged in. Fear of what the regime might do, a strong commitment to self-preservation, or simply a sense that things were tough enough without sticking their neck out for other people, inhibited probably the majority of those in Germany and the new German Empire from contesting the daily excesses, in particular, the victimization of the Jews. So the takeaway from Kinot 6, which we're about to read now, is the question I think we should ask ourselves. So what are we willing to do to sacrifice for what is morally right? And what do we rationalize in our lives that we know is morally wrong? And this is something I alluded to yesterday. It's a study in the Daily Science, that people change their moral values to benefit themselves over others. It's from Stony Brook University, that people are willing to change their moral views in order to show that, if it means more money in their pocket. And what kind of things in our life do we do? What kind of moral choices do we make that that if we step back and say whether this is right or wrong, we would come to really the taking away the money and taking away all the other factors. Do we make such moral rationalizations in our life? So we'll now take just a few minutes to read Kinot number 6, and then we'll come back to the theme. Again, no more than 3 minutes for each Kinot, and then we'll move on to the next one. I encourage everybody to look at the English, see what takeaway do you have from this Kinot, and how are you different after reading this particular Kinot. The next Kinot is all about the, it says, we're asking Hashem, why do you remember the bad? Why don't you look at the good, right? Why do you remember the anger during the Roman times and not remember the bris ben habesarim? We need to let go in our lives the bracho, the bad parts, and start looking at the brachos. Let me show you this one video that really brings that message home. I'm also going to put it once again. I'll put the kinos in the chat if you didn't see it.
It was visiting day in Camp Chedva, and 12-year-old Yocheved Brookstein's parents and grandparents came up to spend the day with her.
Every summer, my grandparents would come with my parents to visit us, and I looked forward to it the entire time I was in camp. I was in my bunkhouse with my mother and my grandmother and my sister, and my grandfather and father were walking through the path of camp. And as they were walking through the camp, they saw another older man walking by them. And my father noticed my grandfather nod in acknowledgement to this elderly man.
My father-in-law, who knew all of his father's acquaintances, friends, everybody in his life, said, "Who's that man?"
So he said, "That was my best friend from before the war." I said, "Your best friend from before the war? Introduce me. I'd like to meet him." He said, "No, it's better that we don't meet."
And my father pressed him and said, "I really would like to know what's going on there. What's the story?"
Why don't you go over to him and hug him and speak to him, see how he's doing?
And my father then went on to tell me why he's not introducing me to him.
My grandfather lived in Romania at the time, right before the Romanians were being deported. He had this very close friend. He and this friend learned together, spent a lot of time together. And his friend asked him, what are you doing for your family? How are you saving them? How are you getting out? And my grandfather, who had foresight, had secured visas for himself and his wife and his child and his in-laws. And he told his friend, "I actually have visas, we're getting out." And I put them in our hiding spot.
The next day, I went to look for those visas. And Robbie, they were gone. And so was my friend with his entire family.
He knew he hadn't told anybody else, and only the two of them knew about this particular area. He was deported to Auschwitz with his family. They were all killed. He survived. And he heard subsequently that this man had made it to the other side of Romania and had survived the war really with his family and made his way to America.
Robbie was shocked. He said, "Dad, because of him, your wife, your child, and your in-laws were killed in Auschwitz. Before I asked you, why don't you hug him? Now I'm asking you, how can you even look at him?"
I said, "Robbie, let it go." I said, "What do you mean let it go? What do you mean let it go? I can't believe what..." Just listen to me, he said. It was a different time, it was a different place. People were under tremendous pressures. Everybody was looking out to do what they can to survive. It's over. There's nothing I can do about it. We have to go on.
We've all experienced the pain of being hurt by someone else. The first step in resolving conflict and letting go of resentment is learning to be curious about the other person's experience. Asking questions like, what triggered them to act insensitively? And are they going through something difficult in their life that I don't know about?
My father understood what had propelled this man to do what he did. Did he forgive him? He had killed his family, and this man's family had survived. It's hard to forgive somebody for something like that. But he understood what he had done, and he was able to go forward.
You let go of the past. You live life moving forward. There's no point to holding on to hurt or to anger. The only one you hurt in that process is yourself, not anyone else. This Tisha Bav, let's commit to repairing the broken relationships in our lives so that we can bring Mashiach one step closer.
So the takeaway from Kinot 7 is one of my takeaways is, can you think of people who suffered and were still happy and thankful for their lives? I think we could all think of such people. We all met those people who really suffered in their lives, and then they were still happy and still able to look at their brachos, be able to move on from the suffering. How did they do it? On what type of life do you see them live? You see them happy? Do you see them, and the people who are not able to do that, what kind of life do they live? What kind of ways can we see more brachos in our own lives? So now again, we're going to read Kinot number 7. Again, no more than 3 minutes to this Kinot. Kinot number 8. I said, Lord, I ask for your help every year. My people say that this will be the year, but I will let all know that I am aware of their plight, that the hand of the Lord has done this. I bow down my head to you, Lord, my strength. I kneel before you in supplication to bandage my wounds. I will praise you in song with verses from my wounds. I will direct my prayer. If only you could be with us as a brother. Here we asked for help, and there was really no help in coming. There's an interesting book that came out a number of years ago. I'm going to start with, we're just going to watch a very few minutes of this book called The Unanswered Letter, just to hear what it's about. We're not going to go through it. You're not going to hear the end of this. If you want, you could follow this this presentation here on YouTube, or you could read the book. So I just want to hear what actually happened in this particular story, and then it's going to lead to another very powerful video.
It begins with a letter, actually, that came into my life unexpectedly over a decade ago now. It was written by a Viennese Jewish man, Alfred Berger, to strangers in America in August of 1939. August of 1939, historians among you may know, was just at the in the tense run-up to the opening of World War II in Europe. So Alfred Berger had been underneath Nazi occupation, Nazi rule, for a year. And Jews were flooding out of Austria, trying to find a safe place to go. Countries had slammed shut their door to the flood of refugees. And Alfred Berger was desperate. So he is writing to, he had no contacts in America who might offer him sponsorship to immigrate. So he's writing to a stranger with the same last name, hoping that this stranger will have pity on him and sponsor him. So the letter begins, "Dear Madam, you are surely aware of the situation of all Jews in Central Europe, and this letter will not astonish you. By pure chance, I got your address." And he goes on to explain that his daughter and her husband will be able to immigrate soon. That the Berger son-in-law has a relative in America who can sponsor just one family. So Alfred Berger is desperately searching for another sponsor. And in this letter, he begs a stranger to sponsor him. He closes his letter saying, "I beg you once more, help us to follow our children. It is our last and only hope."
I wanted to go through this very powerful video that Warren Buffett said. Very short video.
When you get to my age, you will not measure how well you've done by how much money you've got. I can guarantee you that. You'll all do fine on money anyway. I mean, think about it. 7 hours a day, you're in a bed. You got exactly the same mattress I've got. If you don't, we'll sell it to you at the furniture market. We're on a parity. I can't outdo you, in terms of my sleeping enjoyment. You can match it by buying this mattress, which we'll give you a special price on. Just mention my name. We eat at the same places, We eat at Dairy Queen, particularly if you're in my position because we own it. But we eat at McDonald's and Burger King, and when I leave here, I'll stop by a fast food place. So our eating experiences are the same. We travel the same. I mean, I had a 10-year-old car up till about a year ago, and it just doesn't make any difference to me. And they all work. We live in a place that's warm in the winter and it's cool in the summer, and we watch the Super Bowl on big screen TV. You do it, I do it. We dress more or less the same. I mean, I pay more for my clothes, but they look cheap when I put them on. So we're really on a parity. Yeah. So the money isn't going to be that big a deal. Everybody in this country is going to, with the intelligence this group has, the energy you have, you're going to do well. So what's the difference? What really counts? Well, I would say that you will measure, health is enormously important, and that's a matter of a fair amount of luck. I mean, so I'm not shortchanging it. I'm just saying you can't do too much about that. But you will measure your success in life by how many, and extent, whether it's the people you want at 70 or whatever the age may be, you'll measure it by how many of them really love you, in the end. I mean, you can't buy love. I mean, it doesn't work. You can buy sex, you can buy testimonial dinners, you can buy your name on buildings, you can do all kinds of things. But the only way you get to be, love is to be lovable. It's kind of irritating, actually. If you got a lot of money, it'd be more fun to just write out a check for $1 million. So everybody, from now on loves me. But it doesn't work that way. And in fact, the only way is to be lovable. And I've got this friend who came out of Auschwitz and had at least one member of the family die there. And what is it now? It's 60 years later. She still, when she looks at people, it's a Polish Jew, when she looks at people, the question she asks herself in determining who she really trusts as friends, the one question in her mind is, would they hide me? Now, when you get to be 70, if you've got a lot of people that would hide you, you've had a successful life. I know people who have a tremendous amount of money, no one would hide. Their own kids wouldn't hide them. I mean, they really wouldn't. I mean, their business associates wouldn't, or anybody else. If it really came down to it, they don't have anybody's respect. They've got their attention maybe with money or something of the sort, but nobody loves them. They pay homage to them, and the kids may put up with them and hope they don't change their will or something. But the truth is that nobody would hide them. And if you've got a lot of people that would hide you when you get to be 70, you will have a very successful life.
It's a very powerful statement. So the takeaway from this Kinot and how are we different after, do we have those people in our lives that would hide us? And who would we be willing to hide within our lives? Are we too busy or too self-absorbed to be there for other people when they really need us? There's a Good Samaritan study. I don't know if you've ever seen this study. It's a very famous study. It's called From Jerusalem to Jericho, a study of situational and dispositional variables in helping behavior. So it's a famous old study, and the study shows that people, they had these students who they even talked about the Good Samaritan helping others. And when they put pressure on them they would have somebody, they would go to give a lecture, that they had to prepare a lecture on being a Good Samaritan. And then on their way to that lecture, somebody was falling down, and they would say, would they help this person or not? Even though they're giving a lecture on doing that. They're giving a lecture on doing this. And they found that when people are in a rush, they wouldn't do it. They were just too busy focusing on what they had to do next, that even though they were giving a lecture on helping other people, when somebody needed their help, they weren't there for them. When they had more time, so then, yeah, they would do that. But when they were in a rush, they didn't. And that's really the question that we have, is that you have pressure you have pressure. So during that pressure, during the Holocaust, when they had pressure, so then what comes out of you? And that's really why you have to work on this now. We work on these things now when we don't have that same pressure, because then when a time of pressure, that's when your real self will come out. That's when you'll decide whether or not you'll hide people or not. So again, we're going to take no more than 3 minutes to read Kinot 8. We're now going to skip, and then we're going to start skipping around a lot. If you see as the notes, we don't go through each one, we skip a whole bunch. And maybe every year I'll try to come back and do different ones that we skip, but there's the main ones that everybody seems to talk about. This Kinot number 10 is based really on a Gemara. The Gemara tells us that Moshe instituted for the Jews that there were 8 priestly watches, 4 from the descendants of Elazar and 4 from the descendants of Itamar. Shmuel came and established them at 16, and David then established them at 24. So this Kinot is based on the 24 watches. So each, they would take a rotation on working in the Beis HaMikdash. And the other times, the Kohanim were our teachers. And so that's what they did. They taught Bnei Yisrael. And so there's amazing history here on not only were they teachers, but when you think about it, they were the fighters. They were the last defense to protect the Beis HaMikdash at the end. So when we look through this Kinot, we're going to see some things that stick out. So it says here in the Kinot, now this I found, I give credit to Rabbi Kenneth Brander, who spoke about this. So he said, so it says, because they denied bread to the poor was the watch of Yodfat ensnared, Yodfat. Then you'll hear, see, Bakohane Arbel. Let's look at the history behind this. This is fascinating. If you actually go and look at the seas of Yodfat, you could look at the Wikipedia. I have it as a link here. When I could send out the slides. So you hear that Josephus. Who is Josephus? So Josephus was a commander. He was also the big biographer that he talks all about a lot of the history we have from Josephus, and there's a whole question of where his loyalties are to actual history, or just trying to put a spin on it for the for his captors. So at the outbreak of the Jewish war, Josephus was appointed commander of the Galilee, which was probably the most important military assignment during the first stage of the war. The cities which Josephus claimed to have fortified were isolated from one another and could defend themselves singly without any cohesion or plan. The decisive battle took place around the city of Yehoshaphat. This is what it's talking about. This is what the Kinot is talking about, to which Josephus had retired and which resisted for 6 weeks. When the city fell on the 1st of Tammuz, Josephus fled with 40 men to a cave. There, each man resolved to slay his neighbor rather than be taken captive by the enemy. Josephus artfully cast the lots, deceitfully managing to be one of the 2 men left alive, and then persuaded his companion to go out with him and surrender to the Romans. So this is what the Kinot is talking about when it talks about Yehoshaphat. The other thing that we've pointed out was these caves of Arbela. This is fascinating. So what happened is, and there's a bunch of things on this. I've seen a whole bunch recently, also in some of the video tours of Israel. They show how the fighting went. So here, what they used to do is they recently found these caves. If you look, it's really only a few years ago that they really found these and understood these caves. But this is where the Kohanim went, to these caves. They had ritual baths and so on. And this is where they went, and they were trying to hide out and fight from. They found a coin. And if you go through some of the tours that they have of Tisha Bav, tours of Israel, so you'll see that there was a bunch of these type of coins that were found. And it says, for the redemption of Jerusalem, the holy. And so they actually made coins during the time to get the Jews to go, to encourage the Jewish and the struggle. If you go to the Kotel, at the Kotel, nobody really may not look carefully at all those different stones, but if you look on high, you can't see it. There's a sign there that talks about this. It's a pasuk, and the pasuk from Yeshayahu. So it says, "You shall see, and your heart shall rejoice. Your limbs shall flourish like grass. The power of the Lord shall be revealed in behalf of his servants, but he shall rage against his foes." This is on one of the stones. There's a number of stones that have writing on them. This stone's all the way up high, but actually at the time it was really very, very low. This is where people were able to write, and so these are the types of messages that they wrote to encourage each other. I wanted to talk to a little bit more contemporary, where we saw that certain people stood and tried to fight for the Jewish people through the ages, and we're willing to die on their principle. Here of Elchanan Wasserman, he wrote Svarim that he's often quoted in the yeshiva world today. His son Simcha became a big Melamed teacher in California, and so he came into America right before the war. Towards the end of 1937, Wasserman's traveled to the United States for 17 months to raise money for the yeshiva, and he knew what was going on, but yet he went back to the yeshiva and to be with his students. He didn't want to abandon his students. So for 24 hours, they all tried to get the Jews really tried to get him and so a bunch of the other prominent Jewish figures. They tried to get them out of, but they were not successful, and he was killed. But you see, the people believe in the Jewish cause and willing to sacrifice their life for others, and to especially in the terms of leadership. Here I would like to talk a little bit throughout the presentation. Mostly I put them a bunch of people together. Here I wanted to talk about Rabbi Robert Sandman, who passed away. I see some of the same. Like I said, we're just going to keep each one to short, and I do have the whole day to go back and look at them a little bit more closely. Well, now let's go to Kinot number 11. On this, the Mizrahi put out, I actually have booklets they sent me. I'll bring them out at Mincha time. Forgot to put them out. But they have on Tisha Bav, they sent out their magazine. They also had some small videos. So here, this one is this is the oldest Kinot that we have, where Yirmiyahu gave a hesped for Yoshiyahu, gave a eulogy for Yoshiyahu. So let's hear it from one of the tour guides in Israel.
There you are. Welcome to Megiddo. Just be careful. That's the first gate. They can stop you there. And then there's 2 chambers. They can stop you here. And then there's another gate. And then there's another 2 chambers. They can throw down fire. But well, welcome to Megiddo. I mean, are you sure you want to keep coming? People have gotten killed around here. Okay, if you want, we're going to keep going. And here we are in the royal stables. We keep the best horses here, well fed, and they're not here for fun. Scout, this means war! Giddy up! So you can see we store food here for years. Nobody's getting past Megiddo. Only the people of looking at the hills of Menashe that lead up to Mount Carmel. And now we're looking at Israel is on its arm, where Yehu killed the king of Yehuda and the king of Israel, wiping out the family of Achav. And now Givat HaMoreh, Gidon on one side and the Midianites on the other. Har Tavor, that looks like a dome, with Dvara and Sisro. The hills of the Galil. If you want to get from the way of the sea through the passage and cut across to Europe or to Asia, Megiddo is one of the places. It's always been powerful. You see a place there, Vodazara, from thousands of years ago. This is the great Megiddo, so full of history. But we're here for one story. We're a few years before the destruction of the first temple, the first Beit HaMikdash. Yoshio becomes king at age 8 and rules for 31 years. He is wonderful. It says in the book of Kings, Vayas hayashar b'nei Adonai vayelech b'chol derech David aviv v'lo sar yamin asmo. He did what was right, finally, in the eyes of the Lord. He went in the way of David, his father. He didn't turn right or left. He refurbishes the Beit HaMikdash. They find a Sefer Torah open to the Tochacha, to the rebuke. And Huldah the prophetess says the end will come. Yoshio hides the Ark of the Covenant in the room prepared for that purpose by King Solomon, and now goes on a rampage, destroying idolatry throughout the land. He completes that rampage. He thinks everything is wonderful. And then, in his days, Paro Necho comes up from Egypt to go help the king of Assyria fight his last gasp battle in the area of Carchemish and Haran. And that's where Assyria will end. Paro is going up to help the king of Assyria on the Har Prat and the Euphrates. He cuts through from the way of the sea to go through the Jezreel Valley, and he comes by Megiddo. Here, Yoshio comes to greet him by Miteo Megiddo. Paro Necho kills Yoshio Megiddo. They take him from Megiddo and they bury him in Yerushalayim. That's the story in Sefer Malachim. In Chronicles and Divrei Hayamim, we get more insight. We hear about an incredible Passover, that there was none like it. And the Kohanim and Levim and Judah and Yisrael, there's never been such a Pesach from the days of Samuel and all the days of King Samuel. It's incredible. And in the 18th year of his kingdom was this Pesach, and then Yoshiyahu has prepared the house. Paro Necho comes to fight in Carchemish on the Prat, and Yoshiyahu comes out to greet him, meaning to fight him. And the messengers come from Paro. He says, I'm not coming. Mali Balach Melech Yudah. I'm not coming to you today. Oh, that may be a hint. I'm going somewhere else. Below Hasiv Yoshio Panah Bimenu. He didn't leave his face him. He came to face him. By Yavo Lilachem Befikat Megiddo. He came to fight him in the valley of Megiddo. And here he was shot in his chariot. And here he died. And now, by Konen Yirmiyahu Yoshiyahu. Yirmiyahu there was nobody like him to build up, to protect, to heal the breaks in the fences, to help the Jews act properly since the days of Moshe. But the late Sanhedrin, people had idolatry hidden secretly behind their doors. Then when this policeman came, they didn't discover. And Yirmiyahu tells him, don't go. He doesn't listen. The Lo Shamala Chosel Shuba Charaim, he didn't listen to Yirmiyahu to go back. And as he's dying, they come close to hear him, and they see him say, Ruach Svatav Yitzami Kiyo, his last breath. He said, Sadiku Adonai Kitiu Mariti, I accept the justice of God. And that's why in the Kinos, Echa Yuam Zahav, how was the gold spoiled? And Ruach Apenu Mashiach Adonai, the breath of our faces, the breath of our lips is the anointed of God. Yirmiyahu is expressing what Yoshio was. Tam b'mikre echad kos Megiddo l'shto. Suddenly, in one moment, the cup of Megiddo has been drunk. And it was in the time of Shnat Shemitah when everybody came together for Hakel. God held off for 22 years before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, even though Huldah has already said it's coming. Because they mourned Yoshio properly. So we have a commandment from Yeo to mourn Yoshio every single year. Rav Matis Weinberg explains that Yoshio brought us almost the whole way back. We almost made it. We would have been finished. We would have accomplished our purpose. We came so close. It wasn't like any other tzaddik. So we mourn the loss of that potential. Sometimes we're offered the possibility, we can fix it, we can do it. Do we respond and do we stay whole within that process? Then we can be zocha to the Geula. In the meantime, we mourn Yoshiyahu when we came so close.
That's the Kinot. I sorry, I realized from thank you, David Magid. I realized that I sent out the wrong thing. I sent out my slides, not even the newest slides. I sent out a old previous slide presentation. So I apologize for that. You should have now the keynotes in the chat. So we'll spend no more than 3 minutes reading this. And here's the takeaway message for this one. How do I bring out my own potential and the potential in others? How important it is. You see that's what he did. He tried to bring out the potential of the Jewish people. They weren't ready for that. He didn't really understand them. He didn't see them for what they really were. So that's part of it. You have to be able to see people for who they are. But we all have to be able, whether we're parents, whether we're in business, we have to be able to bring out the potential in others. Some people try not to. They sabotage others because they want to build themselves up. But for real successful leaders, create leaders. That's what Rabbi Sachs said. Successful leaders create leaders. And that's what we all have to strive to do. So we'll spend no more than 3 minutes reading this particular keynote. So now we're going to do a pretty big skip. We're going to go from 11 to 21. We're going to skip 10 keynotes. I had actually others in there, but I decided just in time wise, I'm going to move on. And maybe we'll save some for next year. Hopefully we won't have to. Hopefully we won't. I always put my file saying next year's keynotes. Hopefully we will not have to use this. But in case we do, so maybe next year we'll do some of the other ones in between. This keynote is also one of the most famous ones. We read it also on Yom Kippur, Arzei Halvanon. It talks about the deaths of the martyrs. If you look at it, each martyr that's mentioned, it points out what's special about that particular one, what particular person. So for instance, here we see that nothing in the Torah of Moshe that he did not observe. Here, Rav Chanai and Rav Chitzpah. So here birds were flying overhead and singed. So this one's about observance. This one's about Torah. This one, Elazar ben Shemua, he's about Shabbos, when the Shabbos was going. So then, Havdalah. So he didn't say the last words of the Havdalah. So we see that each one, we learned something special from each individual person. And last year, I thought about the idea of that Tisha Bav is a time of mourning and a remembrance. And I thought, how come we don't do that? A time to remember all the people that we lost in our own life. So last year I started in the keynotes to talk about the people who were lost over the course of that particular year. I apologize if I'm missing anybody from our list that's coming up. And I apologize for all those years that I never thought about this idea. I think every single person has really touched us and has changed my life for who it was, and has changed all our life. I figured I'd start with a little poem that that's called "There Is No Night Without a Dawning" by Helen Steiner Rice. That there's no night without a dawning, no winter without a spring, and beyond the dark horizons, our hearts will once more sing. For those who leave us for a while have only gone away. out of a restless, careworn world into a brighter day. I went in alphabetical order. Each person is really very precious to all of us. Bess Abel was here for since I've been here. She's been here in the West Orange longest. She grew up here. Her parents were very prominent members of West Orange. She was very devoted daughter to them when they had. She quit her job and spent her life really taking care of her parents when they couldn't take care of themselves. When her mother had dementia, and she really had to take care of them. She was always, around the neighborhood, offering water to people who walked by, and she cared about Torah and tradition, and was going to be sorely missed. Each one, I thought of some ideas for each individual person, but I didn't want to see. I was going to talk about her devotion and so on, but people are very complicated, and there's so much to them. It's not just one thing, but I picked out some ideas in my head of each individual person, and something that I take away from and what I learned from each person. Alice Barrow. So Alice Barrow is Karen Tumim's mother. I never met her, but you could see that she was born and raised in Brooklyn, and she received her master's degree in education at Brooklyn College, and then she was an elementary teacher for over 27 years in the Board of Ed. So not only did she affect her own family, and you can see how our family has grown, and they're a big part of our community. The Tumans are a big part of our community, but she affected so many children in ways that she never ever knew. People don't look at their teachers until later on in life. They are who they are because of their parents, because of their influences, but a lot because of their teachers. Deborah and I mentioned this previously. Deborah and I, when the boys graduated, we gave each of the teachers not just one teacher. They asked for teachers in the for a gift, but we went and we gave a teacher for every single teacher that they had for an elementary school. Now they're doing for all the teachers, but you gave for your grade. And so we gave to every teacher a little gift, because we said that education grows on, it grows on itself. It's not just 1 year that it all happened. It happened over the course of this year. And Alice was one who affected many people's lives. Edward Druce, this is Howard's Druce's father. We met him, if you've been in shul for a while, he came, he was around. I met him a few times, and he was a chazan, and he was a very devoted Jewish Jew, very devoted to the shul, and he sang at the shul, had a beautiful voice. And it's very sad that at the end of his life, he had COVID, and the family couldn't really be with him. When he passed away, there was a Chabad rabbi who came in and put tefillin on him, and that was so important to him and his life. His tradition in the UK was very important to him, and bringing beauty to Judaism. Zev Goldfisher. Also, if you've been around shul, this is Sam Goldfisher's father, a really amazing person, not only in here, but especially in the Elizabeth community. Zev he arrived from Czechoslovakia in 1939 as a sergeant, and he went to the U.S. Army. And at 98 years old, he was still volunteering at the YMYHA. He was serving meals. So if you went to there, everybody talked about him. His funeral was amazing, and the amount of people, I can't remember a funeral of an individual who had so many people on Zoom. I actually only know this because I did the Zoom, and I couldn't believe the numbers just kept coming in, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And I think it was over 500 people came to him. I think it was even more than that. It was like 7. It was a crazy amounts of people who came to his funeral, because he had that amount of influence on everybody he touched over the years. Francis Gruber. I found this on the internet. Vilno ghetto escapee pays a visit to their past. Francis Gruber, she also spoke on names, not numbers. So it's not on the internet, but she was a Vilna ghetto escapee, and I got to know her over the years. She was a really very sweet, very caring person. She was wanted to really rebuild Judaism from the ashes of Auschwitz. And she came here with David, who also was a Holocaust survivor, and they remade life in this country. And they built a family, a great family that will carry on the tradition that was lost in Europe. They were not afraid to talk about the Holocaust, both of them, and their experiences and the struggles that they went through. But they really worked hard. They were the ones who built up ABJNG in the West Orange community. They were big, important members. The West Orange would not be the same without the Grubers. Jerry Marcus. I can't remember Jerry. I think I met him once. This is Jeff Steele's brother-in-law. He ran 19 Ironman tournaments and 55 marathons. It's pretty incredible. I can't even do one marathon. And they have this thing called Rabbis on the Run or something like that. Like Girls on the Run, they have like Rabbis on the Run. And I don't know, I haven't gotten it to be able to get to any significant running. And yet he ran 19 marathons. I mean, that takes a very driven individual. Jeff talks very highly about how wonderful and a loving person he was to his sister, and he died tragically in a bike accident recently. Edward Rosenblum. Wow, he was such a powerful individual. I got so much out of him through the years. When I talked about people who are happy, even in the worst of situations, I think about him all the time. He was such an unbelievable individual. He actually saw Hitler. And he swam here, and he joined the U.S. Army, and throughout his whole life he lived through tremendous hardships, and yet he was always so positive. He always had great messages. This link goes to a video. I'm going to actually click on it.
Studies a talk
where Mark Shapiro brought
Holocaust
him
because,
to talk to his students, and it's a great video. You can look it up. From Vienna to Omaha Beach, and he was really very powerful. Even at the age of 90, I think he was. He got, here it is. At the age of 90, he got his degree from Adelphi. He used to take his bike, and it would be in bike competitions. He'd be in races and beat people much younger than him. And he'd take his bike and go to Adelphi, and he would study and get degrees. And Hillary Clinton gave him his degree. He was always into education, making sure that he bettered himself in every single way. A real true inspiration. Warren Rothenstein, Zev Velvel, Ben Lev HaKohen. I actually believe I did meet him. I do remember him. I met him a couple of times. This is Alan's father. He was born in Philadelphia, and he lived 88 years. He was worked in a telecommunications company, and he was a very dedicated father and grandfather and husband to his family. Alan, talks about him. He was very into technology and with the newest things. Also somebody who's really willing to learn and better himself in life. So the takeaway my takeaway is, what legacies are we going to leave when we depart from this earth? It's such an important question, and a question that people don't ask themselves enough, I believe. So again, we're gonna not spend more than 3 minutes going through our Zehal. Each year, I try to take a different communities and talk about different things that happen within the Jewish world. Last year, I talked a little bit about the Crusades was one that this really talks about the Kinot. I think we should look at various different times in history. I actually had a lot more of them in here, but I only picked one. So this year we'll do Tach V'Tat, and we'll have Rabbi Wein explain it.
JewishHistory.org presents Rabbi Beryl Wein's 5,000 Years of Jewish History. One video clip at a time. Clip number 44, Tach V'Tat, 1648 and 1649.
In the year 1648, a Ukrainian soldier of fortune by the name of Bogdan Khmelnytsky mounted a revolt against the absentee Polish landlords who controlled the Ukraine. Now, the Polish landlords, since they were absentee, they weren't there, so who was running their farms for them? Who was running their businesses for them? So they all hired Jews to do so. That put the Jews in a very delicate position, really an unfavorable position. Nobody likes to pay rent. Nobody likes to pay debts. Nobody likes when somebody comes to collect. And therefore, amongst the Ukrainians and the Poles, there was a resentment against the Jews. Khmelnytsky, in his rebellion against the Polish landlords and against the Polish army and against eventually the Russian army. So if you have to fight an army, you know, it's dangerous. But if you can kill defenseless Jews, it's not so dangerous. And therefore, in the years 1648 and 1649, Khmelnytsky and his forces slaughtered over 250,000 Jews in Eastern Europe. They caused hundreds of thousands of others to become refugees. The Jewish infrastructure in Eastern Europe was destroyed. The great rabbis had to go into exile. Those that survived, entire communities disappeared. It would take 100, 150 years to attempt to rebuild what happened, and that never came back to the glory that it once was. Khmelnytsky himself died in 1653. He is treated in the Ukraine as a hero. In Kiev, there's an enormous statue of him, riding on a horse, triumphantly. So as we all know in the world, one man's hero is somebody else's villain. The Jewish people certainly don't think of him in any way as being a hero. We think of him as being a wanton murderer. And he fed upon the anti-Semitism, which was always present, and upon the religious anti-Semitism that was present, certainly in the 17th century. It was present all over, and it's present today, unfortunately, as well. And therefore, you had this tremendous disaster that destroyed Jewish communities in the Ukraine, in Poland, and Lithuania. He reached as far as Lithuania to the north. It is seen as a watershed in Jewish life. All of a sudden, they'd been in Poland in Eastern Europe for 400 years, and everything was wonderful, and they had good jobs, and they had autonomy and self-government, and the Polish kings promised to protect them, and all of a sudden, poof, it all went up in flames. And that was a bitter lesson. And because of that, therefore, great changes will come upon the Jewish world in this 17th century, changes that have lasted until now, till the 21st century, the effects of which are still felt in the Jewish world and in the general world as well. I want to thank you for watching. My name is Beryl Wein. My name is Beryl Wein.
For Jewish History.
I did talk about this in Shul a little bit more detail, how Peter, what they call Peter the Cruel, was actually very good for the Jewish people. He protected the Jews up until his death, and that's what really gave rise to some of the fervor and so on. Anyway, oh no, sorry. Yeah. So if needed, are we ready to step in and rebuild Jewish life? This is a big question that I always had in my life. It's part of the reason that I became, it's a big reason why I became a shochet, Moel, all these different things, because I always felt that a Jew has to be ready to step in and rebuild Jewish life. That we always have to, we have a responsibility that if there's nobody else there, we have to be the ones to make sure that Judaism survives. Do we have the tools to do that? That's something that I challenge people on. I challenge the interns that we take. I say, do you have the tools to do a tahara? Do you have the tools to, not everybody may have the stomach to do a milo or shvita, although I encourage everybody who does to do it, that you should be doing these things. And I'm willing to teach anybody. I teach anybody anything. I teach them Mila, I teach Shvita, no money. I'm willing to do it just so people will be able to have the tools to make sure that Jewish life could always flourish. And do we have the strength to do it? We have the fortitude to be able to go ahead, and where everybody else is against it, are we able to stand up to the crowds and take on the challenge of making sure that Jewish life not only continues but flourishes. We'll read Kinot number Chaf Beis, no more than 3 minutes. Once again, Skip. These are pretty fascinating videos that come up. First, I want to show you what's happening in France.
Aujourd'hui encore, 107 tombes du cimetière juif de Westhofen, dans la région du Bas-Rhin, ont été profanées. L'antisémitisme est une haine qui peut se caractériser par 3 principes. Elle est multiséculaire, génocidaire, mais aussi protéiforme. Parce qu'elle se réinvente sans cesse, il faut constamment trouver les nouveaux moyens de la combattre.
L'antisémitisme en France harcèle, agresse, il a torturé, il a tué. Nous le pensions vaincu au lendemain de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Il n'en est rien. Les chiffres sont connus, n'en sont pas moins glaçants. Plus de 74% d'augmentation des actes antisémites en France en 2018. C'est le bilan tristement dressé à la fois par les statistiques officielles du ministère de l'Intérieur et la Commission nationale consultative des droits de l'homme. Et il y a fort à parier que lorsque les chiffres officiels pour 2019 seront connus, ils ne montreront certainement pas une décrue des actes antisémites.
The question is not whether or not anti-Semitism could happen today. You see whether the Holocaust could happen today. You see how it starts manifesting itself. In fact, in America, this just came out yesterday, I think it was, or 2 days ago. 25% of American Jewish voters believe Israel is an apartheid state. This was in, what was it, JPost or JNS? A number of years ago, I had a lot of trouble finding it, but MTV put out a commercial for just a few minutes. They showed, so it's a 1-minute commercial. It's so powerful. And it says the Holocaust could happen here. Let me show you this video. So powerful, those commercials. So what's the takeaway message? So what are we doing today to fight anti-Semitism? I think it's a simple question, and it's one that we all have to answer. I think it's very important for us to be prepared to answer and to be up on all the different talking points, because it's just going to get worse. And we have to be out there protesting and making sure that that it doesn't get worse, because we see what could happen as time gets worse. So we're going to load Kinot number 28. Again, no more than 3 minutes for this Kinot. The next Kinot is a song. That's one that we'll sing. I'll sing together. I'll sing quickly. And I have this. It shows the difference of when B'tzeisi Mitzrayim, when we were happy when we left Egypt, to the sadness when we left Yerushalayim. There was a powerful video that was put out that brings this this message home. Very, very powerful video. So the takeaway from this keynote is we all came through COVID-19. So how are we different? What positive changes have we brought to our lives? How do we make sure that such a thing doesn't happen again, where we're once again faced with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? I'll quickly sing the Kinah. You could all sing along with me. Tukad Bekir Bibalosi Ali Bibitsesi Mimitrayim. Then it goes down. Kini Mayiralman Askira Bitsesi Mirushalayim. Yishir Moshe Shir Lo Yinasher Bitsesi Mimitrayim Bichonen Yirmiyah Benana Neimiyah Bitsesi Mirushalayim Base. See, he's konan v'shachan he'anan v'tzeisi mi mitzrayim b'chamas el shachna kanana v'tzeisi mi Yerushalayim kale yamram al v'cha choma kamo v'tzeisi mi mitzrayim zidunim shatfu v'al roshi safu v'tzeisi mi Yerushalayim Digan Shamayim Itor Yezuvu Mayim B'tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Lana Mirorim Umayim Hamarim B'tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Ashkem Ba'arev Tzvivos Harachorei B'tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Korei Elavel Al Naros Pavel B'tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Marek Vod Adonai Keishol Cheletz Lefanai B'tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim V'charav L'tusha L'tavach N'tusha B'tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Zevachu Mincha V'shemen Amishcha B'tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Skulas El L'kucha Kitzal N'tivcha B'tzeisi Mi Yerushalayim Chagim B'Shabbat Sos V'Mofsim V'Ov Sos B'tzeisi Mi Mitzrayim Tanis ve'avel mod or uradov ha'chavel b'tzeisi mirushalayim tovim oalim la'arba degalim b'tzeisi mimitzrayim v'ale yishmaelim emachanos arilim b'tzeisi mirushalayim yovel shmita ve'eretz shot keita b'tzeisi mimitzrayim machalatz misus B'charus lacharutzus b'tzeisi Mirushalayim kapros ve'aron ve'avnei zikaron b'tzeisi Mitzrayim ve'avnei kala ve'kalei ba'ala b'tzeisi Mirushalayim l'pim aronim v'shivim zakenim b'tzeisi Mitzrayim nogsim umonim umocharim kovakonim b'tzeisi Mirushalayim Moshe Yireu v'Aaron Yinchelu b'tzeisi Mitzrayim Nebuchadnezzar ve'ad Rayanus Kesar b'tzeisi Mirushalayim Naroch Nachama v'Adonai Shama b'tzeisi Mitzrayim Rachak b'menu v'nei einenu b'tzeisi Mirushalayim Sisrei Parochas b'sidrei Mareches b'tzeisi Mitzrayim Chema Nitekes v'alai Socheches b'tzeisi Mirushalayim Ola uzvachim v'ishay nechochim b'tzeisi Mitzrayim b'cherev medukarim b'nei Tzion hayikarim b'tzeisi Mirushalayim b'arei migvos v'chavod nikvos b'tzeisi Mitzrayim srigos v'teruos v'kolos u'zivaos b'tzeisi Mirushalayim tzitza zahav u'mishel rahav b'tzeisi Mitzrayim u'shluch nezer v'afos ha'ezer b'tzeisi Mirushalayim kedusha u'nevuah kavod Adonai nira b'tzeisi Mitzrayim nig olam morah ruach hatoma b'tzeisi Mirushalayim rina v'yishua b'chatzos ros hateruah b'tzeisi Mitzrayim zakas olav v'nakas halal b'tzeisi Mirushalayim shulchan menorah v'cholil Torah b'tzeisi Mitzrayim elil v'to'eva v'esel hamitzeva b'tzeisi Mirushalayim Torah to Dauchle Hamda b'tzeisi Mitzrayim Sason v'simcha v'nos yagon v'anacha v'shuvim Yerushalayim. The next Kinot is Kinot Tisha Bav. I figured the best person to speak about that is Natan Sharansky.
I was born and grew in the Soviet Union in the years when the policy of Soviet regime was to erase everything Jewish from our lives. So I was absolutely assimilated Soviet Jew, knowing nothing about our tradition, about our holidays, about our faith. And in fact, there was nothing Jewish in our life except from anti-Semitism. And then when in 1967, Israel entered our life. And when suddenly all the world looks at you and says, how you guys did it in Israel, you discover that this mystical connection between you and Israel is the most natural thing. You learn in the underground about your history, and you decide that is the history that you want to be part of it. You meet with Jews who are coming as tourists from different parts of the world, and they say you, we are the family, we want to help you. And you discover the family. And you know that there is a state which is ready to do everything to bring you freedom. And that's how you discover your identity, the history, the people, and the state, that you want to be part of it, and that gives you strength to start fighting for your freedom. And the example of the first Jewish activists, or the first prisoners of Zion, realization that there are people who are living near you and who are ready to do everything, including to go for many years to prison in order to be part of their people, that also gives you strength to start fighting. So when, for a number of years, I was one of the activists of our movement, and when finally I was arrested and brought to the trial, accused in high treason, threatened to be sentenced to death, and the judge asked me what I want to say in my last word to the court. I said very simple, to the court I have nothing to say, but to my people and to my state I say, L'Shana Rabba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Because I knew that if there is oath which connects all of us. If I want to be sure that in the years to come, when I'll be in prison, the Jewish people will keep fighting for my release, there were no better words connecting us than the expression of this hope, of this prayer, of this kmicha, the strong desire to come to Jerusalem. And really, in the years to come, KGB, the secret police, will do everything to convince me that I'm alone, that I'm forgotten, that people are afraid to mention my names and the names of my friends because we are believed to be spies. And I knew that all this is lie. I knew enough about my people to be sure that the struggle for my release and other prisoners of Zion never stops. And really the day came and I was released and went straight to Israel. And after me, many other, practically all the prisoners of Zion were released. And then the Iron Curtain fell. And millions of Jews went to freedom and joined us in Israel. And that is the power of our solidarity. That's the power of our dream. That's the power of our prayers and our connection with Jerusalem. L'shana haba v'Yerushalayim al-Baya.
How powerful is that? Unbelievable. That's what Yehuda Halevi was always dreamed about. Whether or not he ever got there, we don't know. But that was what he wrote when he wrote Siyam Halatisha. This is a little bit long, but it's such a powerful thing that Rabbi Sachs talks about Yerushalayim. I think maybe what we'll do is I'll play this because it's so powerful. It's 7 minutes, and then maybe we won't read this particular, just go on to the next keynote after this.
There has never been a love story like it in all of history, the love of this people for that city. Jerusalem is mentioned something like 660 times in Tanakh. And even though the temple was destroyed twice, and even though the city has been besieged 23 times and captured and reconquered 44 times, Jews never ceased to pray for Jerusalem, about Jerusalem, and facing Jerusalem. Somehow, it was where every Jewish prayer met and ascended to heaven. And there's been nothing like it. Other cities, other faiths, they hold Jerusalem holy, but they have holier places. Rome, Constantinople, Mecca, Medina. Jews only had this one city. A tiny city, but somehow it was the place, said Maimonides, from which the divine presence was never exiled. In those critical and tense weeks before the Six-Day War, I was just coming near the end of my first undergraduate year at Cambridge University. And for the 3 weeks beforehand, we all felt that something terrible was going to happen after all the troops were massed on the Egyptian and Syrian borders. And all of us, all of my generation born after the Holocaust, feared that we were about to witness a second Holocaust. All the Jewish students, vast numbers of them, turned up in the little shul in Thompson's Lane to pray. I've never seen so many people there before or since. The atmosphere was absolutely intense. And for me, it was life-changing. As soon as we saw the paratroopers, as soon as we heard the words Harabayat Biyadenu, I knew I had to go there and see it for myself. And I went there, and looking down from Harat Sofim, from Mount Scopus, down on the old city, I suddenly realized that I was standing at the very place that the Mishnah and Gemara talk about at the end of Makot, when Rabbi Akiva and 3 of his rabbinical colleagues are standing on Harat Sofim, looking down on the ruins of the temple, and the other rabbis are weeping, and Rabbi Akiva is smiling. And he says, "Why are you weeping?" And they say, "Look, the Holy of Holies, and it's ruins. A fox is walking through there." the place that only the holiest man, the high priest, could enter only on the holiest day, and now it's ruins. Of course we're weeping. Why are you not weeping? And Rabbi Akiva said, because there were two prophets who gave prophecies. One, Micha, saw the city in its destruction, and another one, Zechariah, saw it rebuilt and saw it as a place where Od Yeshvu Zakenim Uzakenot, Birchovot Yerushalayim, where old men and women would sit in peace in the streets of Jerusalem, and the streets would be filled with the sounds of children playing. So if I have seen the fulfillment of the prophecy of destruction, am I not convinced that there will one day come true the prophecy of rebuilding and restoration? And as I stood where Rabbi Akiva stood 2,000 years earlier, I said to myself, if he had only known how long it would take, would he still have believed? And then I suddenly realized, of course he would still have believed, because Jews would never give up hope of Jerusalem. We never allowed it to escape our minds. In any of our prayers, at our weddings, we remember Jerusalem. Every time we comfort mourners, we say, Hamakom yanachem etchem b'toch sha'avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. You know, Jews were a circumference whose center was Jerusalem. And I suddenly realized that people that could never forget this holy city would one day come back. And as I stood there, soon after the 6-day war, I suddenly realized that faith brought back Jews to Jerusalem and will one day rebuild its ruins. That is the most powerful testimony of faith I know. What's special about Jerusalem today is, despite all the tensions which are real, nonetheless, it's a place, the Holy of Holies, still to Jews. But also on the Temple Mount are 2 mosques. It's a place of prayer for Muslims. There in the Old City are some of the holiest churches in the whole of Christendom. So it is, nonetheless, a city of peace. One of the very few places in the Middle East, one of the very few places in the world, holy to 3 distinct faiths, where those faiths pray together in freedom and in peace. And that's come only under Israeli rule in the last 50 years. Somebody once said about Israel, and you could certainly say this about Jerusalem, that it's not that long and it's not that wide, but it's very deep. So Jerusalem is very deep, and somehow within its relatively narrow confines, it contains, in Walt Whitman's phrase, multitudes. The other incredible thing about Jerusalem is that somehow magic happens with our sense of time. So for instance, the walls of Jerusalem were destroyed by every conqueror and then rebuilt using the stones that had the previous walls. So if you look at the stones of the walls around Jerusalem, they come from all the eras, somehow past and present, the old and the new are all jumbled together. And then you think of this city, the oldest of the old, and yet Time magazine a couple of years ago listed Jerusalem as one of the top 5 in the world, which is an emerging center of high tech. So it's the oldest of the old, and it's the newest of the new. It is the living symbol of what Theodor Herzl titled his book about the return to Zion, Old Neuland, the old new land, the old new city for the old and renewed people.
I use this as a big comfort whenever I feel that Israel's in Yerushalayim is under attack. I realize that there's no chance ever that Jews will ever give up on Yerushalayim. It doesn't matter what they say in the news. It doesn't matter what any government is willing to say that they're willing to do. We're never going to give that up. So our claim to Israel and Yerushalayim is under attack. How well versed are we in their arguments? That's what I said before. We have to be willing to defend Israel. And are we going, are we doing everything that we can to defend Israel? in our lives. And that's a question that we have when they talk about protests and so on. But we should always feel comfort that Jews will never, ever give up on Yerushalayim. That kinna is Tzion Halatishali. Just in for time, I asked you to repeat that kinna a little later on, and I'm going to go on a little bit to the net. So we're going to go on to the next kinna. We have a few more. This is the burning of the Talmud. I'm just going to skip to the next thing. Here is the location, the actual location of where the Talmud was burned in France, and they actually have a plaque for it here. And if you want to see what it looks like, it wasn't just burning the Talmud. That's only one thing. Throughout the generations, they censored the Talmud. This is an actual picture of a censored Talmud. This is Shulchan Aruch. You were there. You see, it's the Shulchan Aruch. I actually saw a Talmud that was whited out, where it was completely. You see lines whited out, where it was that. That's another type of burning of our or stopping information. The ability for us to teach Torah. That's also under attack today. The ability of who controls the narrative. That's a big thing. We as Jews have a tradition going back for generations of our narrative, but we still question it. I always tell my non-Jewish colleagues that kids at the Shabbos table at age 1, age 2, we have to give a Dvar Torah. And what is that Dvar Torah? The Dvar Torah is challenging all the Torah. We're ask questions. How could the Torah say this? We ask challenging questions because we want to be able to think and to be able to come to the truth. Here's a quick video.
The truth is that Hollywood's elite actors
we're going
can get
a
ripped
quick
while
video
adding 12,
on
15, even 20.
the burning of the Talmud.
June 6th is the anniversary of a sad day in French Jewish history. It marks the day when 24 carriage loads of Talmuds were burned in Paris. That represented approximately 10,000 handwritten manuscripts, absolutely priceless and irreplaceable. And the burning was specifically at the impetus of a man named Nicholas Donin. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about Nicholas Donin and the disputation of 1240, and then we'll try to understand a little bit more about the antecedents of this disputation, both in the practical realm and also perhaps even in the moral realm. So basically, in the 13th century, this is a period when the church was quite ascendant in Europe. The High Middle Ages represented a period of the gradual growth of ecclesiastical power at the expense of temporal power, represented architecturally in the construction of magnificent cathedrals such as Notre Dame here in France. When the church turned to some of its purely religious issues with the Jews, one of the most confusing areas for the church was the mysterious Talmud. This is a text which obviously is central to Judaism. It is the highest expression of the oral law, and much of the Jewish law descends from the Talmud and the debates that are contained therein. However, given that it was written in Aramaic, a language that the church was largely unfamiliar with, being much more well-versed in Latin and Greek, and to a certain degree in Hebrew. And furthermore, the fact that the Talmud is written in a highly arcane and esoteric idiom, the church regarded the Talmud as largely a closed book to them, and they had very little entree into this important document for Judaism. In the 13th century, a man named Nicholas Donin, who was originally a student of Rabbi Yechiel of Paris, mentioned in the commentary of Tosfot, came forward to the church and indicated that he would be willing to reveal the contents of the Talmud. And moreover, the church, he argued, would be surprised to hear that it was a work of great blasphemy, and that it was specifically the document that was keeping the Jews from converting to Christianity. The church was, of course, very interested in his proposal, and so they gave him the authority to do so. The Pope ordered a massive confiscation of Talmuds in 1239. And most European states at that point did not comply, but King Louis IX of France did in fact comply. And a formal disputation was held between Nicholas Donin, a erstwhile Jew who, by the way, had by this time converted to one of the monastic orders. He was also put into excommunication by his teacher, Rebbe Chiel. It's not clear whether the excommunication came after his conversion or prior to his conversion, but at any rate, it ended up in a standoff in this disputation. Nicholas Donin's was the first disputation in a whole series that will extend for the next 2 centuries throughout Europe as the church or various states sponsored official debates between Jews and Christians. Here you see on the left a representation of a Jew who's named Moises. This is not the specific Donin disputation. You can tell he is a Jew by the pointed hat, the Judenhut that he requires, and then he is debating with, it looks like a Christian prelate named Petrus, and they're discussing various points of religious etiquette, and you can see that it's really quite heated from the expressions on their faces. At any rate, Nicholas argued 35 specific accusations against the Talmud, which we can summarize into 4 basic categories. First, he argued that the Talmud was irreligious because it had essentially replaced the Bible for Jews. He argued that Jews spent more time and attention on the Talmud and ignored the text of the Bible. Secondly, it was idolatrous, primarily because it has many anthropomorphic representations of God. And the Jewish commentators deal with this at quite a bit of length. The idea of the hand of God, the God waking in the middle of the night and screaming for the pain of the Jewish people and so on. He argued that it was obscene because the Talmud, of course, does discuss a wide range of elements of the human condition, including issues of sexuality, and after the disputation of 1240. Exactly the same major antecedent. While Jews are thinking that only Jews are reading it, some of these intemperate passages were in fact included in the text. There's a lot more to say about this, but in this short video, we will go on. At any rate, as could be expected, the debate went south for the Jews, and the Talmudic volumes that were collected were in fact burned publicly in Paris on June 6th of 1242, a tremendous bibliographic loss to the Jewish people as a whole. Now, that in itself is a fascinating and sad story, but I think it's very important to note an ironic antecedent to this incident, which is that 10 years before, Jews had denounced the work of Maimonides, shown here, to the Dominican order of monks. And in fact, the Dominicans had taken the Jewish charges against Maimonides quite seriously. This was because Maimonides was in the middle of a major controversy among Jews as to the elements of philosophy that could be included within Judaism, the methodology of works like the Mishnah Torah and so on. And so Maimonides' works were burned exactly 10 years prior to the burning of the Talmud, and as some sources would have it, in exactly the same spot. So one might be tempted to look at the historical tradition here and say that when Jews choose to burn their own books, the repercussions will be quite negative. Nicholas Donin, in the end, was unable to achieve much satisfaction even within the monastic order that he had joined.
You are
He was
fantastic.
later accused of heresy
I
himself.
couldn't.
His
It's
excessive
like so intoxicating
ideology,
that I just
many
want
of his
on this chat.
fellow co-religionists felt that he was inappropriately critical of Christianity. According to some sources, he was actually put to death by the church. There's not a lot of evidence to support that, but it seems to be clear that he was persona non grata even after the disputation of 1240.
Well, again, we will, 1 second, sorry. Kind of move all these slides. We will skip. I'm not going to be able to get to Jacob Frank's The Burning of the Talmud. We'll get to, hopefully, again, we won't have to use that next year, but you could watch it on your own. My takeaway from this is, what book or video are you writing to leave for your next generation? Here you see that people spent their lives writing the Talmud. They wrote the knowledge for us to learn from for the next generation. And so the question really is what are we leaving for the next generation? And it could be a video, it could be a thing, it should be a message. And you should really think about doing that, when you're young. And you can always change it. You can always make another message, but you should leave your kids with more an ethical will. Like what do you really want from your children? Everybody goes worried about their financial will, but how about your ethical will? What messages do you want to leave your next generation? We're going to skip again reading this Kinot just because of the time constraints. We'll move to the next one. The warning signs of the Holocaust, pretty powerful. What are the warning signs that we see today when the Holocaust happened?
This is a switch bike. This is a switch bike. No.
We won't watch this whole video.
As we remember those whose lives were lost in the Holocaust, we're confronted by the question, could it have been prevented? While at the time, few saw that the events of 1938 were leading to the Holocaust, there were warning signs. Can our understanding of these events help us anticipate and prevent genocide in our own time?
"1938 is such a key year because it marked an escalation both of the persecution of the Jews, the violence against Jews, it became more widespread. It also marked an escalation of the Nazi policy of expansion. This is where we can see all the dominoes begin to fall.
From the time that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power in 1933, German Jews had gradually seen their rights as citizens stripped away and their employment options severely limited. But in those early years of the Third Reich, no one could imagine the physical annihilation of the Jews of Europe.
My parents and a lot of other of that generation tried to ignore it. They said, oh, this isn't going to last. This man is crazy. It's not going to last. Well, they were wrong.
An initial warning sign of 1938 came in mid-March when Germany annexed neighboring Austria, an act known as the Anschluss. Within hours, an explosion of violence engulfed the Jewish population in Vienna. It spread throughout Germany in the following months, accompanied by new anti-Jewish legislation. Jews no longer felt safe and tried to get out while they could.
Beginning in March 1938, you have a real push for the first time since 1933 in Germany of large numbers of people trying to get out at any cost, even if they had to give up all of their assets.
But despite official Nazi policy demanding that the Jews leave Germany, emigration was not a simple matter.
It's a very powerful video. We see that there are warning signs that things don't just happen, and we have to take those serious warning signs very seriously as things get worse and worse. People start ignoring them. They start seeing this as people who aren't so serious, or they don't understand or whatever, and they ignore it. But others try to make a stand and try to fight against it. And, and also, if God forbid, Jews always have their passport ready. God forbid if something happens. I saw this video. It's so powerful. It's only a minute and a half, but it's really powerful of somebody fighting against this idea of people just ignoring it or making fun of the Holocaust because they don't understand it. And that's how it starts to get worse, or they mistreat it. Just a small thing he did, and the ability to really bring in the message home. People don't see it, and then that's how things get worse. So he showed him what it really meant. I wanted to end with a small, short video on somebody positive of the Holocaust, somebody who really tried to make a difference.
Well, Irving, this memorial here at Treblinka has very special meaning to you personally. Tell us about Janusz Korczak.
When you think of Janusz Korczak, you're talking about the ultimate educator. If you take all the well-known educators of the 19th and 20th century, Piaget and John Dewey and all of them, they did not have as much insight into the child as he did. And in addition to which, he loved the children. At the same time, he actually gave his life, literally, to comfort children. He could have left the ghetto. He didn't have to even go into the ghetto. He's a well-known individual. There were friends, Polish friends, who were going to save him with no difficulty at all. But he felt, as a father, as the protector, he must be there with them. And so he willingly went into the cattle car at the Warsaw Ghetto with the children. 193 children into the cattle car to comfort them. Boy, it's dark. They don't know where they're going. He's with them.
This well-respected educator from Poland, like you said, could have escaped that fate.
Oh, no difficulty at all.
Yeah.
In fact, the night before the children were being deported, one of his Polish friends came into the ghetto with papers, so that even though he was alone coming in, two of them were allowed to leave. He bereaved his friend, saying, how can you ask me? How can a father leave a child to be in a dark place, scared? Who's going to come?
Separated from their parents, these little children.
These are little children. Many of them were orphans or partially orphans and neglected children.
He was a real hero of yours, it sounds
Without
like.
a question.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Poland, he is well known. There are schools, many schools named for Janusz Korczak. There is a museum in Israel called Yad Vayalet. Half of the museum is about Janusz Korczak and his children.
Wow.
We don't have too many sculptures in America of Janusz Korczak.
Yeah.
But I hope we will have more.
I'm going to put in one more. I think I have one more. Yeah, one more video on this, and then two more videos. I think it's two more videos altogether. This is just beautiful. I had to show this. Very, very powerful. So we'll just read the, and then we have one more short video, and we'll end off with Eli Zion. But we will, with the Holocaust, we'll read the Kinot. It's a very short one. Zichrona. It should be only a couple of minutes, and then we'll go to Eli Zion. We'll sing that. We'll watch a very quick video on that. That brings that message home, and then we'll end off. Zichrona. So that was written by Rabbi Shlomo Halberstam, the Bava Rav. Very powerful Kinot. All right, well, the last one is Elitzion, and I think this 2-minute video brings everything home.
Come on, it's time for shul. You know, it's Tisha Bav today.
So I think that's the overall message of Elitzion, which is viewing all the troubles that we had as a Jewish people throughout the generations. Should all be like a pregnant woman in labor who goes through a lot of pain and sees the pain to have the baby, but then at the end she has a baby, and it's the pain results in something, and that's what we see here. That all this pain that we've suffered throughout the generations, we pray that it comes to an end, and we get to see the baby, the final redemption. Just a quick scheduling notes. Chatzos is 1:03. That's when you could get up and sit on regular chairs. Mincha is at 7:45. Ma'ariv is at 8:30. The fast ends at 9 with Havdalah. You don't have spices for Havdalah. You should also see, and I sent it out on the email as well as on WhatsApp, all the different programs that you have throughout the afternoon. YU Torah has all-day events. OU has events starting at 3. Torah in Motion has events. The Chafetz Chaim, there's a whole bunch of different things. I tried to look throughout the net and see who has events to keep you busy throughout the day. So now we'll all sing a Litzion with the tune that we sang throughout. We sing with throughout Tisha B'Av. Elitzion v'areha, kimo isha v'tzireha, v'chivisu la chagura sakal bal niureha, alei armon asher nutash, v'ashmas son adoreha, v'al bias mechor fael, v'soch mikdash chadareha, Elitzion v'areha, Kimo isha v'tzireha v'chivisu la chagura sakal bal niureha, alei galos mishar seyel, minei imei shir zimareha, v'al damam asher shufach kimo meimei yeoreha, Elitzion v'areha. Ve'areha, Kimo Isha Vitzireha, Vechivisu Lachak Burasak, Al Baal Neureha, Lehegyon Mecholeha, Asher Damam Ba'areha, Ve'al Va'ad Asher Shamim Betul Sanhedreha, Elei Tzion Ve'areha, Kimo Isha Vitzireha, Vechivisu Lachak Burasak, Al Baal Neureha, Lezivche Timideha, Vifidyone Bechoreha, Ve'al Chilul Kelehechal Mizbach Kitoreha, Elitzion Ve'areha, Kimo Isha Vitzireha, Vechivisu Lachagurat Al Baal Neureha, Letape Melocheha, B'nei David Givireha, Ve'al Yifyam Asher Chashach, Be'ez Suru Sareha, Elitzion Ve'areha, Kimo Isha Vitzireha, Vechivisu Lachagurasak, Al Baal Neureha, Ale Kavod Asher Gala, Be'ez Chorban Devireha, Ve'al Lochetz Asher Lachatz V'sam Sakim Chagureha, Elitzion Ve'areha, Kimo Isha Vitzireha, Vechivisu Lachagurasak, Al Baal Neureha, Ale machatz v'rov makos asher huku nizireha ve'al nifutz ale sela ole ala leha ve'uneareha elitzion ve'areha kemo isha v'tzireha v'chivisu lachagurasak al baal nureha le'simchas oiveha sachaku al shivareha ve'al inoi v'nei chorim nidiveha tehoreha Elitzion ve'areha, Kimo Isha v'tzireha, v'chivisu lachagurasak al Baal Neureha, le'pesha asher ivasa sulul derech ashureha, ve'al tivos kehaleha shezufeha shechoreha, Elitzion ve'areha, Kimo Isha v'tzireha, v'chivisu lachagurasak al Baal Neureha, le'kalos mecharfeha, ve'is rabo pegareha, ve'al rig shas Migad feha besoch mishkan chatzereha elitzion ve'areha kemo isha v'tzireha v'chivizu lachagurasak al baal neureha le'shimcha asher chulal b'fim Kame mitzireha ve'al tachan yitzvechulach kishuv u'shma amareha elitzion ve'areha Kimo Isha v'tzireha v'chivisu lachagurasak al baal neureha. Thank you all for coming to this Kinot's presentation. I encourage you all to continue on the Kinos and to also find other meaningful programs throughout the day.
Rabbi, thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yasher Kurf, Rabbi. Yasher Kurf.
Thank you. That was fabulous.
Yasher Kurf. Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.